Irabeth rubs red and tired eyes. Any success? How is the city? Well, depends. I gotta figure out what our main objective is first. Well, you heard what the demon said. They're going to desecrate the Warden Stone and blow up the whole barrier around the World Wound. That would be an even worse disaster than the World Wound's expansion before the Second Crusade. Not only Canabras, but every city with the Warden Stone will be destroyed, including the capital. We can't allow that, no matter what. We will retake it, even destroy it if we must. Yamadei's gift must not become a weapon of the abyss. These Warden Stones, what are they? They are our greatest treasure, the shield given to us by Yamadei herself and placed in Canabras and other Mendivian cities and fortresses by her herald. The chain of Warden Stone forms a protective barrier that stops the expansion of the World Wound and keeps the demons from moving beyond its borders. I shudder to think what will happen if the barrier falls. Mind if I ask you a few personal questions? Frowning a little, Irabeth nods. Please, but I must warn you, there are some things I don't have the right to discuss. Oh, where are you from? I was born in Canabras. I grew up on a farm just outside it, but my way back home lay at the end of a long and winding road. It took me years of traveling through foreign lands before I came to be where I've always belonged. How did you become a paladin? A bitter smile appears on the half-orc's face. I don't much like to remember it. Believe it or not, the story of how I became a paladin is also the story of how I failed to become a knight. My parents were crusaders. May their souls stand together in the Yamadei Celestial Army. When I was born, they retired from the war and started preparing me to continue their legacy. But my father was an orc. You'd be pressed to find a calmer, wiser, and more pious servant of the goddess than he. But still, all his life he was dodged by sideways looks and whispers. When I grew older and it was time for me to serve, I decided anywhere but Canabras. That was where my father had served loyally, and his only reward had been injustice. Besides, the witch hunters, led by the honorable Prelate Herlin, stalked the city with a heavy hand. Who knows what they would have done to a strange girl with green skin? Instead, I went to a smirk that looks more like a painful grimace crosses her face. You can laugh if you want, but I was young and foolish. I chose Lastwall of all places. You can imagine how well I was accepted in a country that's been battling the orcs of Belkson since its foundation. There were many like me, but we were all treated as second-class citizens. To the locals, my green skin was worse than leper scabs. Even my brothers in faith kept their distance. I took my vows, and the goddess granted me the powers of a paladin. But even then, not a single order would accept me into their ranks. I spent another 6 months knocking on doors before I realized a simple truth. I serve Yamadei, not these people. I don't have to prostrate myself before them, so I left. As a paladin, but not as a knight. You must stick out like a sore thumb no matter where you go, right? Well, I know many people envy Asmars, but most of the ones I've known found their celestial heritage a burden. I find it hard to imagine what unasked for adoration must be like, but I'm sure it doesn't make life any easier or any more pleasant. Well then, how did you come to join a knightly order? Well, I left Lastwall and went traveling. The goddess guided me. My path led me to where atrocities were happening. I often fought in exchange for gold, but never for unworthy aims, of course. I wandered the river kingdoms for a few years, killing monsters and tracking down criminals, and sometimes I thought I was just wasting my time, that my true place was in Canabras. But I pushed those thoughts away. I didn't even want to think about going back. But in the end, divine providence had brought me to my senses. It happened in Timon. I was tracking a gang of bandits, which my employer suspected was a cover for Asmarine's spies. I managed to find their lair, but inside I found something far more dangerous than spies, an unholy temple to Zon Kuthan. When I broke in there, the cultists were about to sacrifice someone, the person who is destined to become my wife, Anivia. But that's another story. After I cut down the cultists, I examined their papers and couldn't believe my eyes. A network of evil cults had spread through all of Avestan, including Mendev. Worse, the documents clearly showed that their allies, the Templars of the Ivory Labyrinth, had infested my native Canavras, and were even more among the ranks of the Paladins. After that, delaying my homecoming would be tantamount to desertion. Luckily, I was no longer alone. Nevia was as eager to destroy the cultists as I was. Nevia and I hurried to Canabras. We couldn't trust anyone. These papers indicated that the cultists were infiltrated everything. Luckily, I had some experience in investigation, and my beloved, the half-orc smiles warmly, well, she knew her way around working locks, tailing people, and trading information with the city's bottom feeders. Soon we defeated, alas, not the whole Hydra, but at least a few of its heads. Do you know who turned out to be the leader of the cultists? The commander of the Eagle Watch. Can you imagine? While Prelate Herlin was chasing witches through the city, the enemy had infiltrated the very order responsible for internal security. The scandal reached the ears of the Queen. At first, she planned to disband the order in disgrace, but then she offered its command to me and put its salvation in my hands. Of course, there was one small catch. I wasn't a knight, but I was made commander just the same, skipping the usual progression through the ranks. Wow, I can't imagine the followers of Zon Kuthan in alliance with demon worshippers. Don't they hate each other? They should. But Baphomet's minions are masters of deception. They manipulate Zon Kuthan's butchers as eagerly as Yamade's knights. The cultists from that unholy temple didn't know the true face of their associates in Canabras. We ourselves learned the truth much later, after getting to the bottom of their nest. And how did the people of Canabras feel about your background with your orc father? They tolerated it surprisingly well. I shouldn't have been so wary. Crusaders don't tend to be prejudiced as a rule. After all, heroes from all over the world, even from other continents, come here to fight the demons. Apparently the people are only suspicious of full-blooded orcs. There were already many like me here, and we don't have any problems. Though the locals do have their superstitions, Mendev is as merciless as Lastfall. They just have a different set of victims. I keep seeing those same sideways looks and scowls, hearing the familiar whispers. But where once they were used to whisper behind my back and point at me, now they whisper in my ear and point at someone else. It's so strange to be on the other side of humiliation, to wipe the spit from your face and suddenly be invited to change position and spit at someone else. You must have figured out by now that I'm talking about tieflings. Now it's true that there are many of them among the cultists, few among our crusaders, and our fighters do all they can to drive away those who would be our allies. People shun them, call them Arula's spawn or worse, and if they choose to be born like that. I believe it's quite a feat to rise against the call of one's blood and join the first forces of good. Still, most only see them as the enemy. I once saw a knight bleeding to death because he wouldn't let a tiefling priest touch his wound. Alas, I haven't been able to change this in all my time in Canabras. Well, tell me a bit about your wife. We met in Timon, as I was wandering aimlessly from one ordeal to another. We returned to Canabras together to expose the Templars of the Ivory Labyrinth. The day the Queen knighted me was the second happiest day of my life. The first day was her wedding. But Anivia isn't just my beloved. She's my staunchest ally. We share every victory and every defeat. The best of me is alive thanks to her. I love their romance so much. Thank you for saving her back then, the day Canabras fell. Before her return, the only thing giving me the strength to protect the Defender's heart was hope that I'd see her again. We are in your debt. Ah, thank you, Irabeth. That was a great conversation. Thank you. I am still curious though, sorry. Could you tell me a little bit more about Eagle Watch? It was a small order, created to fight not only the demons, but also the enemy within. To maintain the purity of the paladin ranks, prevent heresy, and identify spies. And it failed miserable at that. The Templars of the Ivory Labyrinth infiltrated it and formed their nest within its ranks. After the Queen entrusted me with leading the order, Neve and I practically built it from scratch. We got rid of dead weight, people who weren't committed. We organized ways to transmit messages and orders safely. We introduced reliable ciphers. We found tacit allies around the city, from crusader orders to street beggars. This was my personal crusade, to purge the city of the Templars who had infested it. I thought I was winning. I could feel it. We were so close to driving the cultists out of Canavras, but... Irabeth frowns. It's hard to admit, but... those successes didn't count for much once the demons entered the city. On the contrary, if it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be a headquarters at Defender's Heart. The cultists would have served up the city on a platter to the demons. The lines of Irabeth's forehead soften. Ah, you know, that's true. It is a good thing we achieved something. Thank you. And thank you, Irabeth. Now, I do have to go. Go. May Amadei keep you safe.